My name is Doug Shoemaker. I'm a captain with the Jefferson City, Missouri Police Department. I'm our public information officer. My last name is spelled Shoemaker. With me today is Lieutenant Steve Weaver, Weaver. He is our investigations section lieutenant. Also present to my far right is Chief Roger Schrader, Chief of Police for the Jefferson City Police Department. Last name is spelled Schroeder. I am going to start by reading off the first paragraph of the media release that we've sent out, just to start things off that way, and then I'll have a few points of clarification. On Sunday, March 29, 2015, at just after 7 p.m., Jefferson City Police responded to an apartment in the 900 block of Southwest Boulevard for what we termed a check well-being call of Robert Spence Jackson, who's a Jefferson City resident. According to the caller, who's a family member of Jackson, he was unresponsive to phone calls or other attempts to raise him at the apartment. The property manager was able to provide a key to the responding officers, who entered the residence and located Jackson in his bedroom. Initial assessment of the scene indicated that Jackson died of an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound, but Jefferson City police detectives were called to the scene to investigate regardless. A few points of clarification. First, he was 44 years of age, not 45 years of age. That was a mistake in the media release on my part. He was employed at the Missouri State Auditor's office at the time of his death. As you are aware, he worked with Tom Schweich, and he was his spokesperson since, I believe, May of 2011. I do want to say that we are working very closely with Mr. Jackson's family to keep them informed of what we're doing in the investigation. We ask the media to respect the seriousness of the investigation, the devastation his family must feel at this loss. Our hearts go out to Mr. Jackson's family and his friends. I cannot confirm the cause of death until results from the autopsy is official. The autopsy scheduled for today. The initial investigation gives detectives the reason to believe that this is most likely a suicide, although we want to ensure we proceed very methodically so as not to leave anything uncovered. There were no signs of forced entry, nor any signs of a struggle. There was one firearm found at the apartment, a revolver, and one spent round was recovered as well. I will answer questions. I would also caution you that this is an open investigation. There are some things I simply cannot answer. I do not want to jeopardize anything we're doing, but I will be happy to try and answer your questions to the best of my ability.
Was there any kind of note left?
We do have a note. I won't go into the contents of what was within that note as part of the investigation at this time.
Do you anticipate releasing it at some point?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question at this point. We'll see how the investigation goes. But again, we try and focus these investigations out of courtesy to the family. We'll obviously comply with any laws with regard to the release of that information at a later time. But since it's an open investigation, we won't comment as to what's contained.
Do you have reason to believe that this death is linked at all to the suicide of Tom Schweich? Was there anything in there in the note, perhaps, in a general sense, that would give you a reason or a motive, perhaps, for what took place?
No, not at this point. We are looking at this clearly as, at this point, at least a suicide investigation. We are very well the political issues that are alleged with Mr. Schweich's death, but our agency won't comment or really entertain questions that might link Mr. Jackson to any type of political issue, whether it's perceived or real.
Any indication of when this act might have taken place? Sunday during the day, earlier?
The exact time of death will be determined, most likely, or I guess a frame of time of death will be determined by the autopsy results. We believe most likely it occurred early in the weekend, most likely Friday, possibly into Saturday.
When's the last time someone actually had contact with Spence?
Friday.
Who was the family member? Was that his mother?
It is his mother.
Is the autopsy being done here or by Boone County?
Boone County.
And when do you anticipate having results you'll be able to release?
I don't know. As soon as we have them, we want to make sure we look at them and make sure and compare that with what we have to make sure we're on the right track with things. But I don't have a definite time frame. I would anticipate possibly today or tomorrow.
I have been told that he did not own a gun. Have you established the ownership of the weapon?
We have not established that as of yet.
Because when you got that call from the mom, what was the context of that? Was she distressed because she couldn't reach him, they couldn't get a hold of him? Could you go in a little bit to what that was all about?
The call was a check well-being call. In other words, we have these calls very frequently where somebody cannot raise a family member or a friend. We respond to the residents. Usually they've tried a number of times to contact them by phone, or could they go to the residence, knock on the door, try and raise them through the windows, other outlets, and she was unable to do so. When we arrived, the field officers, patrol officers that arrived were able to get that key and go in and then found him.
Get the key from a property manager?
That's correct. The property manager provided the key. There was no need for forced entry.
You said there was a note there. Is that, I'm presuming that's a suicide note of some sort?
We won't go into the contents of the note, but there was a note that we believe links us to the investigation itself.
Why do you believe that the note links you to that? What?
The content of the note itself, but again, we won't comment as to what specifically was in it.
Broadly, was it political in nature, the note?
I'm sorry?
Broadly, was the note political?
Again, we won't comment as to the contents of the note itself.
Was the note dated that gives you help in terms of a time frame?
No, I don't want to get into specifics with what is on the note. I understand the questions about the note, but because of the investigation and what we have, we want to keep that close to the investigation.
Do you know yet who the last person who spoke with Jackson was?
We are working on that as we speak. Lieutenant Weaver's investigators and detectives are working on tracing his timeline back to try and determine a number of things that could be linked to the issue itself and to ultimately his death. So that's part of our job, and that's why we're taking our time to very methodically do that.
Will staff of the auditor's office be questioned as part of this investigation?
I would say there's a strong possibility in terms of just talking to them to see what they know.
What about those within the Republican Party?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the reference to the question.
Do you anticipate speaking to them along the same lines?
Well, again, that would take us into a political conversation, and at this point, we won't get into any sort of political discourse as to what was taking place, and we're going to look at this from the ground up and kind of take it from there. We don't know which way the investigation will go, but we are looking at strictly as a suicide investigation at this point, with the options of looking at other possibilities. But again, we leave those options open simply because we cannot completely rule those out as of yet.
Was Mr. Jackson at work on Friday?
That I don't know.
Can you or Steve say how many people were involved in the investigation or who are actually doing the legwork?
We have a group of detectives. I don't know that I want to say how many necessarily, because sometimes we use fewer resources, sometimes we use more, and that number can fluctuate based upon need.
Did Mr. Jackson live alone?
Yes, he did. I believe he lived alone in an apartment.
Any pets?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Do you have any history of a chronic physical illness or mental illness?
I wouldn't want to comment on any type of illness or issues with his health at all.
Kevin, was there anything leading up in the past few days that perhaps a family member alerted you to his state, maybe in the days leading up to this, where you had visits to that apartment, or was there anything to give you an idea that there might be a problem?
We had no contacts with him prior to this time.
Were there any reports about hearing a gunshot around Friday or Saturday from neighbors, anything like that, any disturbances heard at all?
Obviously, we canvass the area, and as part of our investigation, we try and talk to a number of other apartment persons, people that live within the apartment complex. It's a large complex, so I don't know that we've talked to everybody yet, but detectives are doing that along with the assistance from patrol officers, so that's still part of the investigation that's open.
But nobody at the time reported hearing a gunshot?
We have had no calls of a gunshot at that time, or any time really within that time period in that area.
Have anyone you've spoken to from the area said anything unusual was going on?
No.
So Captain, revolver recovered, can you say what kind of gun you recovered? Or?
I will say that it is a revolver. It is a .357 Magnum revolver.
One round spent?
1 round spent.
Was
That
it
is
found
correct.
by him?
The round?
No, the gun.
The weapon was in the general vicinity of him, yes.
Can you tell us what part of the body was impacted?
I don't know that I really want to get into that yet. We'll wait till the autopsy report comes back, and we'll see what they say about it.
Is that a sensitivity to the family? Do they not know a lot of these details yet either?
They do some. We try and keep things very sensitive, and that's why the reason we didn't release the information last night as well in terms of his person. We try and give family members adequate amount of time to contact loved ones, friends before it hits the media, simply out of courtesy, and that's just the way we conduct business.
A couple of procedural questions. Would the autopsy include a toxicology study?
Typically they do, yes. Toxicology, however, takes a long time to return in terms of the results. Toxicology can take weeks.
8 weeks?
No, it can take weeks. Mhm.
The other question, is it part of a police investigation in an apparent suicide suicide and determine the reason for the suicide, or do you go further that it's self-inflicted and that's the end of it?
You know, like I said, we're very aware of the political issues surrounding Mr. Schweich's death, and then within a month, we have the death of his spokesperson. So we're clearly of the understanding of what's taking place. We are doing everything possible to try and make sure that we do this investigation the best way we can, and if that involves other things that we normally would not look into, simply because of his profession, then we'll do that. But we're not there quite as of yet.
Is the autopsy a choice, or is it required by law because of the circumstances in which the body was found?
Well, I think it's a good idea to conduct an autopsy anytime there's this type of instance, for example.
Was there any traces of alcohol or drugs when you guys got there?
No, that's not something we would want to talk about at this point. Again, toxicology would eventually reveal any type of issue that might be a part of that. Go
Does
ahead.
he have any family that you're aware of in Jefferson City?
I don't know the answer to that.
Did you say no, it wasn't found, or no, you don't want to talk about it?
No, I'm not going to comment on that.
To follow up on that, the family you've had contact with has all been in Springfield?
I'm not sure as to exactly where the family is from. Lieutenant Weaver might be able to address that. Do you know where the family is from?
I do not know. I know his mother did come in town last night when she could not get a hold of him and contacted us.
Given the size of the apartment complex and the fact that you guys have been in and out of those buildings off and on for years, would it be a surprise that nobody heard or reported a gunshot, or would it be expected that somebody would have heard one?
I don't think we have any expectations either way. It depends on the time of day that this occurred. If it were, for example, during the daylight hours, there might not have been anybody within the apartments that could have heard it. If it were during the evening hours, there are a lot of factors that can come into play. Some people might not have called us if they heard a shot fired, for example. They might not have thought it was out of the ordinary. There are a number of things that could possibly be factors, and we don't know what those are as of yet.
The specific building that he lived in is how close to Southwest Boulevard as opposed to being way up the hill?
The physical distance, off the top of my head, I don't know.
Yeah, but the context of the investigation,
Go
the
ahead.
context of the investigation, how does that change by the politics surrounding this? I mean, that's got to play a role here, if nothing else, by just the overall approach, right? I mean, kind of give me the political implications.
Right. Well, I think we all have the understanding that most likely on suicide cases, although always unfortunate and always very sad for the family members, you would not all be here for those cases. And we fully understand the issues going on with the death of Mr. Schweich in Clayton, Missouri. We understand, of course, that he worked for him. There are other things that, of course, are rumored to be around. But it doesn't mean we do anything more or less on this investigation in terms of initially that we would anybody else. We try and treat everybody the same. We try and look into the investigation the same. If there are more complexities that come about as a part of this investigation due to the very nature of it, then we'll certainly investigate those as well, and that's our intent.
Can you foresee reaching out?
A repeat question, I'm not sure if I understood. Will searching for a reason for suicide, if it's determined to be suicide, will that definitely be part of the investigation? I'm not sure yet, or not saying yet.
Well, you know, I think there are so many aspects to this that I don't know that I can definitively answer that question fairly. I would say that it is our goal and our objective to do the best job we can for the members of the family. What we're going to uncover in terms of this investigation, I don't know. I would not want to speculate because I don't think that's fair. But we want to make sure that we have some level of closure for the family, and I think that's our job.
Given the relationship that you already stated to the Auditor Schweich situation, have you reached out to Clayton authorities?
We have.
Can you tell me about what about?
Yeah, I don't want to discuss that. Again, this is an open investigation, and I don't want to go into those types of things that could really discuss the active investigation at hand, simply because there are a number of things, complexities that we do in law enforcement that simply aren't public information at this point.
How far do you backtrack? In other words, what was he doing on Friday? What was he doing on Thursday and Friday? What was he doing for the week? Who did he talk to?
I think as long as we need to. The answer would be as long as we need to backtrack until we find some definitive information. And after a while, of course, we try and get all that together to corroborate other information that helps us really paint a clearer picture. We don't know if we'll ever be 100% certain on something, but that's our goal, to be as close as possible to that.
Do you want, in terms of trying to establish a timeline, if you have not heard from people, do you want people to tell you that they got an email from Spence at noon on Friday or whatever?
Well, certainly. I mean, as we say with any type of investigation, anybody with any information at all with regard to the investigation are encouraged to contact our detectives, and that's at 573-634-6400. They can ask for Detective Lieutenant Weaver, and he can provide the appropriate information to whomever needs to be passed on to. I will also say that I would caution the public to be very careful about what they read in social media. Everything is sometimes speculation, and commentaries can be particularly dangerous. So I would say that sometimes it's better to really take those things with a grain of salt until we establish the facts, and that's why we waited as long as we had to release that information and really start our investigation as much as we possibly can.
Kevin, let me ask you again, who did you say was the last person to see him and when?
I didn't.
Oh, okay, I apologize. When do you think it happened, Friday and Saturday?
Well, it's sometime within that frame. That's the last time that somebody had any contact with him was Friday. I think that may be the question you were asking.
Okay, but you're not saying who that was?
That's correct.
Have you heard from somebody who tried to contact him on Friday or Saturday and was unable to do so?
Again, that's part of the investigation that's open, and I don't want to get into that.
I would assume you have taken or inspected his home computer, iPad, phone. Will you be looking at what, is that true?
Well, I would say we've taken a number of items of evidentiary value from his residence, and we will look at those, whether it requires a forensic examination or not, to help us piece things together. I don't want to get into specifics as to what we're looking into and why, because again, it's an open investigation. But knowing full well that that information that may be contained within those particular pieces of evidence could potentially corroborate what we think in terms of the confirming the suicide itself.
Would his work computer be something that would be under?
Well, I think everything at this point in terms of who he is and anything that we would need in terms of the investigation would be something we would be interested in.
The release says he was found in his bedroom.
That is correct.
Was he fully clothed? Was he in street clothes, pajamas, looking like he just came out of the bath? What?
Well, again, that's part of the open investigation. He was found in his bedroom. There were no signs of a struggle, and I don't want to get into any further anything that could possibly be misconstrued or kind of misinterpreted in any way.
Can you say whether or not there was any indication that anybody else had been in the apartment within a reasonable time frame?
That's part of the open investigation. We want to keep that to ourselves at this point until we can confirm or deny some things.
Have you talked with the auditor's office already?
The detectives are working on that as we speak.
Was his mother with you
I'm
when
sorry?
you found the body?
She was present. I don't think she went in with the officers because typically on a check well-being, we tend to procedurally try and clear the residence to make sure it's safe first, and that's the issue when the officers found him.
What is her name? His mother's name?
I don't want to release that information.
Do you know when you'll be able to release more information?
Well, I think the primary bit of information we will release that is probably most of interest to each of you is the autopsy results, and I don't know when we'll have those. Again, it's an open investigation. It'll take as long as we need to do it. We're not on any time frame. We're very methodical. The detectives do a good job at that, and I don't want to speed things up just simply for a need-to-know kind of thing.
I figured we should email you to get on your email distribution.
Yes, please do. I would ask that since we don't really intend to have a second press conference barring anything major taking place, if you wish to be on the email list, please, you have my email address on the business cards that are up here, or I'll be happy to give it to you before you leave today, and I will be more than willing to send you what we have when we send out further releases. That's not a problem.
Kevin, do you think you'll have autopsy results preliminarily back today?
I think it's possible, but I don't know for sure.
You'll release those when they come out?
Well, I'll release those when we can make sure we can release them. Yep. Go ahead.
Did Mr. Jackson have a girlfriend or?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that at this point.
For visitors, because some of us locally know this already, but could you explain why Boone County's doing the autopsy as opposed to the Cole County Medical Examiner?
That's just what we do. I mean, that's just procedurally more times than not what we do it. It's just a technical thing with us. I don't know how to explain it anything than it's just procedurally how we're doing it.
Is that a contract or on a case-by-case basis?
You know what? I think it's contractually, but it's also just an agreement between the Cole County Medical Examiner and Boone County. So.